1812, the Second War of Independence between Great Britain and the United States. During the French and Indian War, Great Britain had a rule called the Rule of 1756. It specified that Britain would not trade with neutral countries who had also traded with the enemy. The Royal Navy did enforce the act, especially in the Caribbean. The War of 1812 started in the West, in the Ohio River Valley, and what the British were doing were inciting the native people there against the American colonists. So the Native Americans formed their first great alliance under a man named Tecumseh. Tecumseh was a Shawnee chief. Tecumseh, who organized the Native American Confederacy, it was an effort to create an autonomous Indian state and stop white settlement in the Northwest Territory, was basically the Ohio River Valley. He firmly believed that all Indian tribes must settle their differences and unite to retain their lands, culture, and freedom. Tecumseh led his followers against the United States in many battles and supported the British during the War of 1812. Tecumseh had a brother who they called the Prophet, and he had dreams and visions. And many of these dreams and visions said that they would be successful in their fight against the white man. Tecumseh and his brothers established a town called Prophetstown, which is still there today if you go along Route 80. The two brothers urged their fellow Indians to reject the way of the white man. Tecumseh was a gifted speaker, and he began to gather other tribes to convince them that the only way to fight the United States was to unite and create their own country. He went to Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, Missouri, Georgia, and even as far south as Florida to gain the Seminole Indian support. His emotional speeches had a great impact on the Native Americans. William Henry Harrison became worried about the alliance that Tecumseh was building. Harrison moved an army towards Prophetstown when Tecumseh was away, and he obliterated that town. William Henry Harrison would later become President of the United States after Jackson, Van Buren, then Jackson. His slogan would be Tippecanoe and Tyler too. The Battle of Tippecanoe in 1811. The army met the Shawnee warriors at the Tippecanoe River on November 7, 1811. Harrison's army defeated the Shawnee and burned down the city of Prophetstown. In 1812, British restrictions on U.S. trade caused another part of the problem. They boarded the ships and took their cargo and impressed the sailors. America also desired to expand its territory west. So from 1812 to 1814, the U.S. declared war on Great Britain. First, the U.S. attacks Canada in 1812 in places like New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Upper Canada, which is along the St. Lawrence Seaway. One of the most famous battles in Canada was the Battle of York in 1813. American forces burned York, the capital of Upper Canada, after winning a hard-fought land battle. It was an easy win for the Americans as they eyed expansion into Canada in the first years of the war. They defeated 750 British and Ojibwa Indians defending the Canadian capital. At the Battle of the Thames in Ontario, William Henry Harrison crushed a combined force of British and Native Americans in this battle. He killed the Shawnee leader Tecumseh and thus removed the most dangerous threat to American settlers in the Northwest. One of the most famous battles in the War of 1812 is the burning of Washington in 1814. British forces under General Robert Ross captured the nation's capital. He ordered the burning of Washington in revenge for the crushing defeat of the British in the Battle of York, in which Americans sacked the capital of Upper York or Upper Canada. He set fire to the U.S. Capitol and the President's Mansion, along with local landmarks. You can see a picture of the White House burning. And this is a picture of Dolly Madison on the right. She was the wife of James Madison. She was known to have detached George Washington's picture on the wall and take it with her before the British came to burn the Capitol. President James Madison and other members of the government had no choice but to flee the city. Madison spent the night in nearby Brookville, Maryland. And there is a big storm that came, and a lot of people said it was the providence of God and helped put out the fires in the Capitol. The British troops also burned the U.S. Treasury and much of the Washington Navy Yard. As I said before, they set the Capitol ablaze and gutted the Library of Congress. Fortunately, someone did get out the Declaration of Independence. A heavy rainstorm on August 26 put out most of the fires. It forced the British troops to return to their ships, many of which were badly damaged by the storm. And this is just a picture of Chesapeake Bay. And as you can see, this is Washington, D.C. right there. And their next battle would be in Baltimore. The Battle of Baltimore. Following the burning and looting of Washington, D.C., British-led fleet by Vice Admiral Alexander Cochrane, Rear Admiral George Cockburn, and Major General Robert Ross decided to sail up the Chesapeake River and strike the port of Baltimore. At that time, it was America's third largest city and a center of shipbuilding. So the fort that guarded Baltimore was called Fort McHenry. They expected the city and the harbor to fall quickly, as Washington had done. Fort William McHenry was the city's main guardian, commanded by Major George Armistead, with a regular garrison. The harbor entrance was blocked by a large chain and scuttled hulks. 16 British ships approached Fort McHenry. They began a 24-hour bombardment of the fort. Brooke advanced to within the sight of the city's strong fortifications. The British concluded that only a night attack supported by Navy cannons could succeed. Ships were unable to reach the fort because of the chain and Armistead's artillery. That night, an attempt to land Marines was driven back. On the 14th of September, 1814, the British decided that a successful attack was impossible and they departed. Watching the bombardment from Baltimore Harbor was American lawyer and poet Francis Scott Key. He was detained on a British ship throughout the attack. He spotted the American flag still flying over the fortress at dawn on September 14th, signaling that the Americans had not been defeated. He later wrote a poem called "The Defense of Fort McHenry." It later became our national anthem. Even though a treaty was already being made in December to end the War of 1812, sometimes the news doesn't reach other parts of the nation. And there was the Battle of New Orleans in 1815. Future President Andrew Jackson and a motley assortment of militia figures, which were frontiersmen, slaves, Native Americans, and even pirates, weathered a frontal assault by a superior British force, inflicting devastating casualties along the way. Andrew Jackson inflicted over 2,000 casualties on the attacking British ships. He suffered only 333 in the entire campaign. The battle became a touchstone of American pride, and it all had occurred after the war had technically ended. The war ended as I said before, in 1814, December 24th, and it was known as the Treaty of Ghent. The Treaty of Ghent was the peace treaty that ended the War of 1812 between the United States of America and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. Both sides signed it on December 24th, 1814, in the city of Ghent, United Netherlands, or now Belgium. There was no winner or loser. It was pretty much a stalemate.